Good evening and live from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. This is Dr. John Stamey, and I want to welcome everybody to ScaryCast. Got another landmark show tonight. Great guest, great co-hosts. First of all, I would like to introduce our co-host. Number one, the Dean of ScaryCast from the Midlands of South Carolina, Dr. Trey Dunaway. How are you doing tonight, Dr. Trey?
I had a nice day today, John, and happy to be here tonight with you.
We are glad you're here. It's going to be a lot of fun. We got a lot of great things to talk about. And from Ewing, West Virginia, up there in the mountains, I'm Ewing, Virginia. I'm sorry, up there in the mountains, the one and only badass monster hunter, Matt Delph. How are you doing tonight, Matt?
I'm doing great. Doing great. Glad to be here.
Well, great. We're glad to have you. Now, tonight we have, I think, an extra special guest. He's very interesting. He has introduced me to so many concepts that I think are very important in our study of the paranormal. He is the one and only Vortex Detective, the one and only Dan Shaw. How are you doing tonight, Dan?
Oh, very glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
You are welcome. Um, we are. I am so glad to have my co-hosts and my guest tonight. I think this is truly an all-star lineup. So here is kind of what we're doing tonight. I am going to be writing an article that will hopefully appear in a major Atlanta newspaper. It is an update for the Dome houses and the Dome House community in Lakemont, Georgia, which is, in my opinion, one of the paranormal centers of the entire universe. It's in, as I say, east, Georgia, right up there where Rabun County sits between North Carolina and South Carolina. And this past weekend, I was up there at the Dome House community, and I was very fortunate. Peter Kelly built monolithic domes, and we'll talk a little bit about them. And a lady that has a beautiful, he called it a chapel. It's a beautiful monolithic dome, and it's also what's called a Baytar. What it is it's an acoustically beautiful building. You can whisper at one side and hear something on the other side at full volume. It's rather unbelievable, but it works. It exists, and I was there, and I talked to her, and we had a great time. In fact, we were even talking about running an event there. We'll talk about that maybe in a couple of weeks. But right now, we want to talk about the Baytar, and we want to talk about the dome houses there in Lakemont, Georgia. But there was a 1997 or 1996 article actually about the dome houses in Lakemont, Georgia, in the 1997 Creative Loafing magazine in Atlanta. And I'm updating this article because there's a lot to talk about. So we're talking about tonight dome houses. We're talking about the fabulous Baytar. We're talking about UFOs and vortexes because we've got the Vortex Detective himself. So, Dan, start us off. Tell us a little bit about vortexes, what they are, how they could be created. Now, I've got a little thing here. What is it? You see
Uh,
that, Dan? Tell
the
us a
Golden
little bit about
Vortex,
that too.
the
So
Golden
that's right.
Vortex
So
device. Mm.
we're going to turn it over to the Vortex Detective himself, Dan Shaw.
All right. Well, I would set the stage by saying that uh, every living cell exists in within a geomagnetic field. We're bioelectric, biomagnetic beings. The cells are exquisitely delicate electric organisms. Uh, they're highly sensitive to variations in the overall magnetic field, I would say. So the vortex effect is a two-part process or phenomena, and that has to do with ourselves, our living organisms such as ourselves, animals and plants as well, and how we're affected by the energies, the turbulent sea of electromagnetic energies in which we exist. So there's I think a mundane, generally recognized as science approach to vortexes and the vortex effect, and I approach it as scientifically as I can. I'm interested in what is to me, an essential unity between ourselves, our electromagnetic field, and the electromagnetic field in which we exist. And I'm oversimplifying by saying electromagnetic fields. I'm also interested more broadly and deeply in places and how places affect us, how they affect how we feel, how what our neurology, how we think, how we experience the place. So places that make us feel something very broadly, as well as we talked about last time, very specifically places that may be conducive to paranormal experiences. So I'm very much interested in the paranormal, but that's not the direction from which I approach vortexes. I'm approaching more from a healing standpoint.
Nice. And I like what you said. I try to approach things from a scientific standpoint as well, being a PhD trained scientist from North Carolina State University. But what I can say, and I'm very serious about this, the paranormal of today is the science of 100 years from now, because the paranormal is a lot of times the unexplained. We can see effects of the paranormal, and we call it paranormal because we don't know what it is. But you know what? The more research we do, Dan, and I hope you agree with me, the more true research we do, the more we learn about the paranormal, and we learn more about it, and we find out what is really behind it. Do you agree with me?
I agree. I think we're so many people have had paranormal experiences. We have direct knowledge and experience as opposed to belief. And so I make a pledge to talk about the paranormal, not just on podcasts, but in everyday life. And it continues to be remarkable to me about how many people, once they know I'm the Vortex Detective, out comes their paranormal stories. There was a second part to your question, though, at least, which I could get back to, which is about how we could potentially build devices to affect the vortex, roughly speaking, the field around us, or how we could perhaps build a vortex. And that's where we're going with the talk about the dome communities, the monolithic domes, Peter Kelly, his Beitar, the vortex effect. Again, it's a two-part effect. There's a natural part and there's what you could call a man-made part, whether that's actually building a monument or maybe just consciousness and intention. So it's entirely possible to build monuments that work with the natural energy fields of the planet. In fact, I propose that that's exactly what the ancients were doing when they built these ancient monuments, such as Stonehenge, the Great Pyramid. They were built out of energetic materials. They were built with a knowledge of an understanding of these geomagnetic energies and principles, and they were built to influence these energies in some way. And it's entirely possible for us to do the same. And that device you were holding was invented by my friend Nick Nelson, who would absolutely state that there is nothing paranormal about vortexes, that they are completely natural phenomena. And he's been studying magnets all his life, and he's developed a certain understanding and arrangement of magnets which emulates or recreates similar same effects that you find at a natural vortex. You still with us, John? Oh, we might have lost John. Are you,
John?
Like he's frozen in time.
I think maybe he got sucked in by a vortex and now he's just staring at us.
Well, the three of us are still here. So, Trey.
I almost slid into the vortex, but I pulled back at the last moment.
Trey, have I said anything you could disagree with yet?
No, that's what I think we ought to just proceed. John might come back in and out, but usually what we do is you there, he's gone and he'll be back.
But we're still recording, it seems.
Yes, that's all right. We can
Okay.
still do this, but usually we get the guests to kind of talk a little bit about what they do, and then we just ask questions. So
Sure.
if you're ready, I've got a couple of questions.
Chime right in.
How do you define a vortex? Because
Sure.
I remember I went to Sedona, and they said, "Oh, this is a vortex. It's the center of the vortexes." But what is the definition of a vortex?
Sure. Well, perhaps every researcher might give you a different definition, but from my standpoint, which is an emphasis on the geophysical energies, I would say a vortex is anywhere where the electromagnetic field is anomalous. In other words, it is distinct from the surrounding field. So that could be almost anything. It's a very broad definition. It could be the edge of a cliff, the foot of a mountain. It could be waterfall. It could be spring. It could be seashore. Any number of things. In particular, we could look at volcanoes or lava fields, and these are highly magnetic, and they're magnetic in some pretty interesting ways. So if you are in a volcanic area and there are lava flows that have occurred over a long period of time, those lava flows will actually hold a magnetic imprint, a paleomagnetic imprint of the time when they cooled, because as they cool, they take on the magnetic field of the surrounding area. So
you get alignment. You get alignment of the whatever the element is,
iron particles. Sure.
In the lava, so that way you can tell the orientation of the magnetic field at the time it was created.
Exactly right. So as you get the slowly changing or perhaps rapidly changing magnetic field of the Earth, that leaves an imprint in the lava flows. Yeah. So now as an organism, as we move across this, we expose ourselves to these varying electromagnetic fields. Perhaps it's by going underground, whatever it may be, then that has the potential, at least, for us to sense it and to have an effect on us. In fact, not only that, but because one of the principles of alchemy is that there is no separation. And I consider what I'm doing to be geomancy, to be earth magic, and to be a subset of alchemy. So the same rules apply. So there is, in all things, there is no separation, but especially between ourselves and our environment. So not only are we affected by our environment is also affected by us. It's more than even a reciprocal relationship. It's a relationship of unity.
So a vortex, by definition, or by your definition, would be an anomaly in the surrounding geomagnetic forces for whatever reason.
That's true.
And how do you detect the anomaly? How do you what is there that you use to quantitate or qualify the anomaly, the vortex that you can detect?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's all kinds of generally recognized as science. Maps are available of the geomagnetic field. There are many components to the magnetic field that we're not using in our everyday life. We're not generally thinking about, but many different kinds of magnetic maps. The magnetic mapping has been carried out extensively for petroleum and other kinds of mineral mining. They also can use gravity maps to find those ore and mineral deposits. So those maps can also be helpful in our research. Just The vortexes, to my mind, are caused by all the dozens of components of the electromagnetic field. So, not just subsurface features such as ore and mineral deposits, as we're talking about, or surface features such as mountains and waterfalls and cliffs and such, but also atmospheric features. Of course, go on up in the atmosphere, you get into the ionosphere. That, to my mind, that's part of the vortex effect, and on out to the sun, moon, planets, all part of the vortex effect, to my mind. But in particular, we're looking at magnetometers on the ground and in the air as well. Standard air charts, aeronautical charts from the FAA still show magnetic disturbances. So you can pick those up at your airport. They're throwing away the old air charts, so sometimes you can get them for free because they're updating them real frequently, but they still show magnetic disturbances because pilots used to navigate by magnetic compass. So all those kinds of standard maps are available. And then, of course, we use our own organism on the ground. We have many different ways of sensing these energies. We have magnetite in every cell of our brain and concentration in our sinuses. So that gives us a plausible mechanism for us to have magnetoreception like birds and bees and fish. And people are sensitive and can learn to be sensitive to these energies and to dowse in various ways with a couple of bent rods, a forked stick, a pendulum, or without any device at all. People can dowse for not only water, but also minerals and these kinds of earth energies that we're talking about. Hey, welcome back, John. Don't touch anything. Oh.
I won't, but so you're talking about dowsing rods like these that I'm holding right now?
Exactly.
Exactly, and they work very well. I tend to have some real success with them. In fact, a friend of mine who was my postman, he wanted to see them, and so I took him out there, and I said, "All right, I'm going to see if I can find something that you just delivered that has money in it." And these little dowsing rods started crossing in front of one of the post office boxes. And I said, "Did you put something in there that might have money in it?" He said, "I sure did. I can't believe that you could find it." So yes, dowsing rods, and Dr. Trey has seen me use these successfully, right, Dr. Trey?
You and my daughter. My daughter can make dowsing rods work, and I'm just low paranormal person. I can't make them work to save me, but my daughter
Well,
can. It's remarkable.
yeah, right. And now, Matt, have you ever used dowsing rods?
Yeah, we use them actually out in the field in the Meadow Project with Trey Hudson and Jessica Jones. We've used them out in the field along with other things like EMF meters and yeah, I mean they've asked questions. He used the dowsing rods basically that and pendulums and everything. So we definitely use everything that's available to us.
Well, Dan,
Well,
that's a quick. I'm sorry,
it's
Dan.
a fact. It's a fact that power companies and water utility companies do use dowsing rods to find underground deposits of water and minerals. Now they do. They don't like to talk about it, but they do, especially over in England. There's several articles that I have found that talk about how the utility companies over there use these little dowsing rods because they work, because they sense with the person using them, they sense things underground, and they cross, they spin around, they do all kinds of stuff. And so, yeah, we kind of got to give dowsing rods their due. They really work. Now, a lot of traditional scientists, if they don't talk about them at all, they will say, well, they don't work. But they do, and companies use them frequently to find buried water mains and things like that that they can't find otherwise. So they're kind of cool. You know, they use these subtle right now. They use subtle energy.
Well, that may be up for debate because I do have a 1971 paper from Ohio State University on sensing underground, or rather, sensing magnetic fields, and it seems to indicate that. Well, it uses the term motor sensitives. In other words, people who, their motor, physical motor skills are sensitive to the magnetic field, and they find actually that they've used hundreds of experimenters who have not dowsed before, and they find that those people are sensitive to what they are identifying as the gradient of the electromagnetic field, and with a statistical significance, and just numerous calculations demonstrating statistical significance of motor sensitives, in other words, dowsers, untrained dowsers, being sensitive to these gradients in the electromagnetic field. So again, you could argue back and forth whether it's what did you say, subtle energy, or some kind of an electromagnetic energy that, it's electromagnetism is so new to us. We just barely even understand it at all.
Okay.
Dan, when you look at if you map vortexes, are they relatively static, or are they? I would imagine if you had flowing water under the ground, if it's not flowing as much, maybe it would change the dynamic that you'd see. The same thing could go with other things. But do you find that the vortexes are relatively stable, or are they dynamic and always changing significantly?
There definitely seems to be a time component to these vortexes. We find that they're relatively stable. Many of them, especially those that are associated with these the platonic solids inscribed within the globe. So if you can think of the 5 platonic solids, the cube, the tetrahedra, icosahedra, dodecahedra, octahedra, when you inscribe those into the globe, you actually find that there are these significant geologic points that fall at the same latitudes, the same points, where the points of these geometric shapes would touch the surface of the Earth. So those, I would call those highly stable. And for example, I would use the tetrahedral latitude at 19.5 degrees north, 19.5 degrees south, where we find so many significant features on the Earth, namely the Hawaiian Islands, a stable hotspot in the molten core of the Earth, as the oceanic plate slides across it, much like the Yellowstone caldera there. So certain vortexes are stable. I would say that they're also evolving conscious beings just as we are, and fluctuating in the time domain according to cycles. For example, the moon cycles, eclipse cycles, that manner of thing, solstices and equinoxes. So different researchers, again, take different approaches, or like the numerous blind men feeling different parts of the elephant, many of us approaching the same phenomena from our own unique perspectives. So I've been studying many different researchers, and also having direct experiences of my own. So I do my best to differentiate between those, to speak broadly about researchers in general, and then if you drill down to specifically what my own experience is. So I would say, if I may just tack one more thing onto that these man-made vortexes, such as these ancient monuments, When we intentionally set up some kind of an energetic field by either building monuments or with our consciousness, intention, and magic, then these are persistent, even if the parts are torn down and scattered to the winds. Let's say we can set up these intentional etheric subtle energy vortexes in a way that is persistent.
That's very impressive, Dan. I will say that I am taking a trip up to what I believe to be a vortex. It is in Boone, North Carolina. It is, what's it called? It's
Mystery Hill.
Mystery Hill. Mystery Hill. I mean, it's so funny. I was born 30 miles from Mystery Hill. Saw it when I was 8 years old, and water runs uphill, and all kinds of crazy things happen. It was kind of discovered as part of an orchard by the Hudson family. They would stay sick when they would get near it, and I called up this amazing gentleman named Matthew has arranged for me and either one or two other people to go up there and investigate it and write an article, which I think is going to be a pretty landmark article. I am a scientist, and I'm going to have to talk to you, Dan, because you are familiar that this is a thing with lots of vortexes. Is that correct?
Yes, there are a number of genuine electromagnetic vortexes around the U.S. that are open as tourist attractions. One of them is in North Carolina between Boone and Blowing Rock, and it's called Mystery Hill. There are another number of others around the country, which I have visited them all, and they do show certain phenomena associated with vortexes. One in particular called the Shrink and Grow, which we can certainly talk about a little bit more a little bit later. Let's just kind of bookmark that for the moment. There's a very inexplicable visual demonstration called the Shrink and Grow at these vortexes. So these are Mystery Hill, North Carolina, and other places that are open as tourist attractions. But of course, there are other vortexes where you can see similar same phenomena that aren't necessarily commercialized as tourist attractions. Yeah, it might be one just outside the gate, as there is at the attraction in Irish Hills, Michigan, in the parking lot. So there are these natural vortexes where some people do not feel well. They feel nauseous. They feel a sense of motion, spinning. Different people experience it in different ways. And I would say both healthful and not healthful vortexes, and entirely depending on the individual and the time and place. So anything that can heal can kill. And certainly if these places have an energy, if places have energy, that energy could be healthful or not beneficial. So it's important to be aware of how you're responding to your place and position yourself appropriately. So natural vortexes from any one of these dozens of contributors to the electromagnetic field, and then man-made vortexes of some shape or form. And that brings us right to Lakemont, Georgia, and Peter Kelly in Interdimensional Sciences, and the BETAR, these domes that Peter Kelly built, and the chapel. The domes that we generally think of are after Buckminster Fuller, and they're built with a number of struts into triangles, and they look hemispherical usually. But you're saying that Peter Kelly's domes were monolithic. In other words, they were built like a giant stone out of a single piece, monolithic stone, mono single. So can you say more about that, John? Because I can speak generally about building vortexes, but I don't know the specifics of the BETAR.
Okay. I met my hostess. She was very nice, and she and I have developed since quite a wonderful rapport and relationship about this technology. I walked into this place. It is a dome house. It looks like an igloo. All right. That's exactly what it looks like. And it is round. It is 30 feet across. And it has a curved roof on it. And what happens is you go in there, and I was talking with her. She was playing some music. It was actually at A432, which a number of us know is 432 was probably the frequency that a lot of the Egyptians listened to their music on. So anyway, so she's playing all this, and I'm talking to her, and I turned around and I was standing right in front of the wall, and I spoke, and it was like there was something that magnified my voice. It was like a loudspeaker. I was talking at a normal volume, and it all of a sudden got very, very loud. It was unbelievable. I didn't know what was going on. And then I turned around and it was gone. And I turned back around just talking directly to the wall, the circular wall, and it was amazing what was happening. Now we went to the outside. She said there is a cistern. And for those of you that don't know it, it's a well. A cistern is a big well. And she said it's 27 feet deep. And when you go in, it's going to be very cold. We're not going to let you go in there, but I'm going to let you see it. And I had my phone out and I got my light on, and it was there were stones all the way around it. I could see to the bottom, and it was very cold. And she said, what you can do is you fill it up partially, and you can get different acoustical effects in the upstairs, which is, the Baytar. Now, Baytar is a term that also has to do with Baytar beds and other things that they have done. I'm not really familiar with it. And that's one reason that we're doing this is I'm going to take this podcast up there and talk with her about Baytars. I'm going to learn more. I'm in a learning phase with all this. I mean, you can't even find Baytar on in the internet. You just can't. It's not there. So I'm learning, and I'm trying to put together some learning materials so that people can learn what all this is. I mean, it's like radionics, and I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with radionics, Peter. I think you are, Dan, a little bit familiar with radionics. I have two radionics machines here. They work pretty well. They're called the wishing machine, and they apparently amplify and magnify your intention. Now, do they? Yes. And I'm going to tell you why I know they do. I was a very average insurance salesman for 2 years at Transamerica at the office in Myrtle Beach. I got a couple of wishing machines or radionics machines, and I've tried to program so that they would help me sell more life insurance. Last year, I was the agent of the year. I outsold every agent. In the last 6 months, I outsold every agent. And the reason, I don't know if there's a correlation, but I believe there could be, is that I set these things to certain frequencies, and all of a sudden I was selling insurance like mad. So you can say
Nice
what
work.
you want, but
Nice work.
I am going to continue this research. I believe that these radionics machines work. I believe that there are things that can amplify your intention. Amplifying intention, it comes from 1931, from the one and only Think and Grow Rich. There is a section in there about amplifying intention. Now, that is the best selling book of goal setting in the world. Millions of copies have been sold, and it teaches you how to do that. And if you can do it right, well, a lot of people have made millions of dollars by using the techniques in Think and Grow Rich. Now, you can say whatever you want, but there is evidence that we can set and we can change and amplify our intention. Now, again, the paranormal of 2024 is the science of 2124. Tesla said that in 2000. He said that I think 2021. And I've always said, if you had told me in the year 2000, I mean in 1900, there was a little thing the size of the size of a note card that would allow you to call China, everybody would have said you're either crazy or that is witchcraft. Or that's called a cell phone. So the science, what we could say, the paranormal of 100 years ago is the science of today. And I don't know, and I hate it when we call this stuff paranormal. It's not paranormal. The fact is we don't know what it is, so we call it paranormal, like a bunch of dummies. And that just to me says, this is the wrong way to look at things. I consider myself a scientist because I'm looking at things we can't explain. I'm trying to. And by the way, you talked about was that 1971 paper about dowsing, Dan?
Yes.
Okay, I've got to find that tomorrow, and I've
Well,
got to make
I'll send you
copies.
that. I'll send you that copy. You can post it in the show notes. But let me, if I may, let me drag you back to Lakemont, Georgia, because you opened up just a number of beautiful points there. So, what does it take to establish or to create a vortex? I would say, if you walk around in a circle, that creates a vortex. If you draw a circle, that creates a vortex. If you build a circular structure, that creates a vortex. And the vortex that you're talking about from Peter Kelly, the Betar structure there, that's not least an acoustic vortex. But before we even get to acoustics, we can kind of deconstruct the monument in a similar same way as I do Stonehenge in my book, Stonehenge Gardening Tips, using earth energies in your garden. In that, I use Stonehenge as a poster child, shorthand for other ancient monuments, and look at each of the different parts of the monument, not just the materials that it's made of, but the shape of the materials and the electric properties of the materials. And you could do similar same with Betar, in that if it's a monolithic structure, what that means is that it's effectively resonating at a single frequency. It's almost like a guitar string. It's it's under compression in some ways, tension in other ways. This dome, but the materials themselves are vibrating at a certain frequency. Now, I don't know what the materials are that he used, but he could well have used materials that have some kind of energetic property, such as quartz crystal, for example.
Okay, Peter Kelly used concrete.
Okay.
That's what he used. Now, in terms, yeah.
Okay.
Please continue.
So you've got imagine yourself now entering into this dome shaped structure. And think of it as coming into an acoustic resonant chamber, much like the chamber of a violin. And you take a look at the dimensions there, whether it's 30 feet or something close to that. And that sets up actually an acoustic fundamental note, so that if you were to generate that note, either with your voice or some kind of an instrument, it would, in effect, be in harmony with that acoustic space. That chapel is built as an acoustical device, much like the Chartres Cathedral, some kind of cathedral. It's got, in effect, acoustic dimensions to it. And so as you move around this space, you can think of it, your voice setting up these acoustic waves kind of like a pebble in a pond. And then as the waves echo back towards the center, now you're setting up these constructive and destructive interference patterns with the waves. So as you move around the dome, whether you can actually hear any audible sound or not, it's still vibrating with a certain frequency, and you will have different experiences at different places in the dome just based on the acoustics of it.
Now, you mentioned an acoustic betar, the St. Louis train station, where I don't know if it's still, I don't think it's a train station anymore, but that structure. There was a spot where you can talk very quietly on one side, and on the other side of the room you can hear it, but that was primarily just acoustics. What is the difference between the betar with vortex principles versus just acoustic principles?
Well, first of all, I would say that our bodies are antenna. They're
Okay.
resonating antenna. We're picking up these acoustic frequencies. So acoustics sound is part of the vortex effect, and you can build your environment very carefully with healing intention to harmonic proportions, proportions that are harmonic to to us as humans, and build our spaces in human proportions. And so when we set up rectangular rooms with kind of random dimensions, these can be inharmonious or dissonant to us as acoustic beings. So I think it's partly to do with very carefully crafted spaces that are crafted with healing intention in mind, and it could be possible that the space could be set up to resonate with 432. I just don't know, but we see in these ancient chambers, such as we see in Ireland and all over Europe. We do find that these do have acoustic properties, and often we find that the rock art, the pictographs or petroglyphs, occur at acoustic nodes, and some researchers have found that the Stonehenge stones do have a concave interface to enhance the acoustic properties. And we well know of certain ritual and ceremonial uses of sound. So that's no mystery. But what I want to just also draw back into the conversation, John, you mentioned that there's this well, which has, of course, the well itself has certain acoustic properties. And not only that, but by filling it with different amounts of water, you're able to tune the acoustics of the well.
Mhm.
So that is very similar to what was done with the Irish round towers. In Ireland, you find these round towers where the entrance is actually well above ground level, and that these things can be filled, these round towers can be filled with varying amounts of dirt, in effect, tuning this inner cylindrical chamber in an acoustic fashion, just as you would tune any kind of musical instrument, a wind instrument.
That is exactly what my hostess talked about. She said you fill up this cistern with varying degrees of water, and you tune the upper chamber, which is where you walk in and meditate or experience the library or whatever. And just it was amazing. And one thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take this recording and I'm going to let her listen to this, and I'm going to see how her experience probably meshes with what we've been talking about. I think no one's ever done this. National Science Foundation would be terrified to give money for this. I'm sorry, I'm going to be a bad guy tonight. National Science Foundation's terrified of this. They don't want to do this. It's too speculative, and frankly, it might be just too important for the National Science Foundation. I played golf with the former head of grants of the NSF, and I was so very unimpressed with that person. And after 18 holes, didn't want to speak to that person again. I was very unimpressed at the creativity of the National Science Foundation. All they want to do seems like is count butterflies. And you know what? I don't care who hears that. I don't care who it makes mad. You know I'm right. And that's it. But no, it's marvelous what we're uncovering. I mean, Dan, you've got a wealth of knowledge, and you have explained things tonight very well. I have learned a lot, and I'm going to have to replay this several times and take notes and learn about this. And if it's all right, we're going to go over this material, and I'm going to go over it with Dr. Trey. I'm going to go over it with Matt, because I've got two of the smartest co-hosts I have ever had, Matt Delph and Dr. Trey Dunaway. They have such a wealth of knowledge, and we're going to get on this. ScaryCast is a place to learn, and we're talking about real science, and I just think it's wonderful. It's so exciting, Dan. This is so exciting, and I bet you find it very exciting too, don't you?
Well, I wouldn't be studying it if I weren't just fascinated. And I don't mean to try to explain away the mystery. I don't pretend to understand everything that's going on here. I have a certain approach. I've tried to look at as much of the research in the field as I can and to synthesize it. And, I can only hope to reach an audience. And so I very much appreciate you doing your part. And, there's nothing else I'd rather do more than talk about vortexes. So I just invite you to continue the conversation. And I'll mention that my website is vortexmaps.com. And you can send me an email, energy, ENERGY at vortexmaps.com. And I will send you a free ebook. In fact, I'll send you Stonehenge gardening tips, and I'll answer every email. So that for our podcast listeners there.
I've got to make a statement. Something told me to look up ley lines. This was about 5 weeks ago. And I looked up ley lines, and for some reason, your website came up first. And I looked at it, and it said, please call me, I will respond. And I looked at that, and I said, that's never going to happen. This is the craziest thing in the world. That number is disconnected. I mean, just, here I am, I'm always very positive, but I said, this is ridiculous. He's not going to answer. 24 hours later, we had a 2-hour conversation. One of the most revolutionary conversations I have ever had, and it has led to this. And we talk about this 2 or 3 or 4 times a week. I think it's incredible. All right, here's what I'd like to do, because I'd like to make sure that our hosts get in there with questions. So we're going to let Matt ask questions, and then we're going to let Trey ask questions, and then I might ask a couple too. Matt Delph, what do you want to ask the great Dan Shaw?
Okay. It's taking you down the rabbit hole here. Okay, so we know everything's energy, whether it's vibrational or, whether it's the healing, some people believe, it's the materials, it's the angles of the pyramids. People heal with pyramids, stuff like that. Now, in our research, we've used what they call the godlike helmet. And the godlike helmet, you have sine alpha data, you place it on your head, and it's magnets, and it changes the energy in the brain, possibly creating more like a vortex where it shifted everything. So you're using different parts of your brain that you wouldn't. They call it the godlike helmet because it enhances your abilities. Some people, experience like they can see more stuff out around them, everything like that. Now, so I'm wondering, a lot of these places that we have, whether it's the materials that's present, the angles of all these things, do you think that more people would have more enhanced abilities in certain areas just because of the material around them creating this vortex is going to amp up the energy for like manifesting and stuff like that, these energy points? Do you think it would affect the human body to help them?
Yes. Is the short answer there. Now, the I believe you're talking about the so-called God helmet by Michael Persinger.
Yeah,
If I'm saying
I
that
believe
right.
it's called the Quran or Quran. Something starts with a K. You can just Google it. You'll see what I'm talking about.
Okay,
Uh,
so I think I'm familiar with what you're talking about there, and it's certainly true that our brain is being exposed to all kinds of electromagnetic frequencies throughout our day, and some of these are natural, and some of these are man-made, and it's um, I think a plausible argument that these man-made electromagnetic frequencies are not good for our health, and certainly there are plenty of people who are sensitive to these uh, man-made electromagnetic fields and not in a good way, and that it makes them ill. So it's certainly true that uh, if we were to insulate our brains, if we were to step into, let's say, a Faraday cage, in other words, a metallic cage that would block these radio frequencies, these external radio frequencies, we might very well experience a kind of mental peace that we're quite unused to. And by the contrast, we might realize that how much we are influenced by all these kinds of electromagnetic fields, our Wi-Fi routers and everything else, 5G. Um, by the contrast of stepping into a Faraday cage, where we're protected from all these man-made frequencies. So that'd be the one. The other, the 1-2 punch. The second punch would be exposing the brain to specific electromagnetic fields designed to enhance our psychic abilities. I think you could also go that direction, almost as though, well, it's just a corollary of that, I would say. So absolutely, yes, the place, whether if we're going down into a cavern or we're on a mountaintop, that is going to affect our brain cells in some way, shape, or form. And if we're alert to the possibility that that could have an effect on us, then we can, I think, learn to be more sensitive to that. And ultimately, I would say this, with the intention of healing ourselves, really perfecting our physical bodies. And I would go all the way to perfecting our bodies to the point of physical immortality and ascension, the ultimate alchemical work, ourselves as the laboratory, perfecting our spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical bodies. So that is, for me, that's the great work. So we're traveling to sacred places on a pilgrimage to really to activate and trigger our energy body.
Perfect.
Wow. Thank you. Dr. Trey, you got a
Thank you.
question for Dan.
Are there any practical applications for vortex mapping?
As I said before, there does seem to be a close correlation with ore and mineral deposits. So, if you want to have that Western rational mindset about what's the practical applications, for sure, there's that. There's also this aspect of you don't want to sleep on the other side of a wall from your electric meter necessarily because of those
Right.
high electromagnetic fields. So maybe you want to block those in some way or put your bed in a different position. Maybe you'll have better sleep. That's the man-made aspect of electromagnetic fields. But also there are researchers who have found natural electromagnetic grids where you wouldn't necessarily want to put your bed in a negative node on one of those grids either.
And that brings me around to a question I asked with the fellow we had talking about ley lines, and that's the feng shui aspect. Is there a correlation with feng shui principles that you can map from a vortex perspective that shows you when you're in alignment with what a feng shui person would arrange furniture or affect their own environment with vortex mapping or electromagnetic mapping, geomagnetics? in your experience?
Hmm.
Are they one and the same?
Well, I think a couple of different distinctions with that. I'm using vortex in a very broad sense. I'm not trained in the traditional Asian school of geomancy, which is called feng shui, meaning wind and water, feng shui. I'm not specifically trained in that. I have some familiarity. It does start with a highly trained practitioner and a magnetic compass and arranging your space according to the magnetic compass. So feng shui does begin there with magnetism. And to my mind, feng shui is a specialized school of geomancy. So I'm applying the similar same principles, although not from that cultural perspective, let's say. So those principles, though, all super applicable in terms of, let's say, you don't want your house placed in a position where an oncoming car headlights shine in your front window, and if they don't make the turn, they're going to end up driving into your living room. That would be, a dangerous arrow, kind of bad feng shui to have your house placed that way, or maybe on the outside of a curve. Those kinds of very practical feng shui things, of course, there's, to my mind, kind of a vortex effect corollary.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Wow. Matt, do you have one more question? We're going to do the last round for you and Dr. Trey, and then I'm going to have the last word tonight. I never get it. So Matt, yeah, do you have a question for Dan?
Yeah, I was gonna the whole aspect, the healing aspect. What actually does the pyramid type? Because I've known several people that get these mini pyramids, and they go in there for this healing frequency. What is up with those angles that actually cause for them to, to help the healing process?
Okay, I would say that energy has shape, and shape has energy. So the angles that are formed by, let's say, the Great Pyramid at Giza, those are very precise angles. Those will have a very specific effect compared to, let's say, the pyramids in Sudan, which are very much more pointed. They've got a different angle. They're actually going to have a different effect. And then you'll also have a different effect according to where you are in relationship to the pyramid. So there's a brilliant book available called Shape Power by Dan Davidson that talks about how different shapes have different kinds of energetic effects that I recommend very highly.
Okay, because I've got friends that make those little pyramid things. They put different, they get resin and they put different materials in them, and you keep them for your house and stuff. And I was very, curious why they always chose the pyramid shape. Of course, those angles obviously hold some sort of healing or whatever, helps enhance. And I'm just curious about the whole shape of it. Why? What would make it any different than any other shape?
Sure. Well, when you're talking about the Great Pyramid, it seems that angle, that 52 degrees and some odd minutes, is 1/7 of a 360-degree circle. If you look at the Great Pyramid, it embodies all the numbers. It embodies oneness, two-ness, in other words, bifold symmetry. It has a certain threeness about it, a fourness, and eightness, if you follow me, and that that 52-degree angle there, 52 plus, is 1/7 of the complete 360-degree circle and represents kind of a sevenness, an expression of the principles of sevenness in the Great Pyramid.
Makes sense.
Wow. Great. Dr. Trey, you got one more question?
Well, no, I'm happy, John, but our time's running out, so I'll defer to you.
Oh,
Okay.
we didn't ring it around with UFOs, but I think we did well. So thank you all very much, gentlemen. If you'll permit me before you wrap, John, to give my elevator pitch.
Sure, please
that's
do.
this. And I'm sure I'm repeating myself. There's an infinite amount of energy available everywhere, all the time, for our physical healing, our psychic opening, and for harmonizing the planet.
We just have to find it to be able to use it, correct?
Everywhere, all the time. So you don't have to go to the Great Pyramid or some exotic location. That energy is available to you right where you are. Now, it's supportive to go to some park or some place that's you're not going to have the noisy crowds, but it's not required. That energy is available for you everywhere, all the time.
I got a quick question, real quick.
Nope. Yep. Go ahead.
Sure.
Okay. My girlfriend, she does all the meditation stuff, and she's talking about her aura. She does she said she activates the macabre. So what, are you familiar with that and the shape?
Okay, sure. So the Merkaba is from the Egyptian, and it's three parts. Okay, so it's the the MR or MER. That's one thing. The Ka is another, and the Ba is actually another. If you go break it down in Egyptian, and you're talking about essentially the energy body, which is purported to be in the shape of a star tetrahedron. In other words, you've got this platonic solid we mentioned earlier, which is the triangle base pyramid. It has four identical triangular faces, and then it's actually the twin or the complement of the inverted tetrahedron. So again, if you were to describe it in a globe, one tetrahedron would have its point at the North Pole, the other would have its point at the South Pole. Yes, and they would nest perfectly. Now, the Merkaba has been popularized by a fellow called Drunvalo Melchizedek, and he provides a certain meditation where these two interpenetrating tetrahedra are rotating in a certain way. And I'm not convinced that Drunvalo Melchizedek's way that he does it is exactly ideal. However, very highly powerful to visualize yourself, your energy body, that aura or egg, as these two interpenetrating tetrahedra spinning. And some people purport that that is the shape of the energy body.
Perfect.
Okay. That answer your question, Matt?
Yeah. He just like she did. She's always trying to describe it to me, and he nailed it. That's what exactly where she's coming from. Her and the sacred geometry. You know, she's always talking about it, and
there's certain magic to those. There's certain magic to those angles of the tetrahedron.
Yep.
And when you tap into those, that's going to activate a certain energy within yourself. There's a part of your own nature which is tetrahedral, so it'll resonate with you in that way. The other shapes might provide you equally or more profound experiences where you to visualize your energy body in that way.
Okay. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you very much. Well, Dan, I have thoroughly enjoyed you tonight as a guest. We're going to have to get you back on sooner than later.
Thank you, gentlemen.
This is great. And I've got so much to learn. I've got to re-listen to this. I've got to write notes. I'm going to have to talk to everybody and see what we can do. This is fascinating stuff. And it's like, well, where in the heck do you find it? Now, you have publications that probably detail a good bit of this, correct?
I do. I have a number of large and small books about the vortex effect, approaching it from little different angles. Each one, I've got one called How Vortexes Affect Us, that breaks down all the components of the electromagnetic field. For example, I have the Vortex Field Guide, which I wrote after visiting these handful of tourist attractions across the country. Stonehenge gardening tips, American ley lines, supernatural places and visionary maps, which is broader than just vortex maps because there's a dozen other kinds of visionary maps other than vortex maps. So I've tried to approach it from another number of different angles, because it's massive. It's kind of a superhuman scale project. It touches on many different paranormal fields, and also on uh, the stars. Be good for vortex researchers to understand something about the sky and the precession of the equinoxes, and software to roll back the sky so that you can see which stars and planets were rising from a certain point over a certain uh, horizon at a certain time back in history. So there's many different aspects to the vortex research. It's so I'm working to put together what would I think of as a comprehensive course.
Right. That's wonderful. And please, we'll certainly let everyone know when that is available. Well, Dan, thanks. I don't know what else to say other than this has been marvelous, educational, and you have brought up many more questions than answers, which is great.
Yep. Yep.
That is what learning is all about. The more questions that you can generate, the more you will learn. And so thank you very much. We really appreciate you being here on ScaryCast, what I would call a landmark ScaryCast. It'll be up on iHeartRadio and it'll be up on YouTube as soon as I can get it done. And thanks a lot. It has been a privilege having you on here. I'll be doing a call around to all of our co-hosts and to you tonight as soon as we're done. Thanks a lot. ScaryCast will return 2 nights. And can't remember who the guest is, but it's a good one. We seem to be having really great guests, and they're a lot of fun. So thanks a lot, Dan. Thanks a lot, Dr. Trey.
You're welcome.
Thanks a lot, Matt. We'll see everybody next time on the one, the only ScaryCast.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Okay.